Hey, how's it going? Zixwala here. Rand manipulation saga is still an ongoing case in the Constitutional Court. And whether you give a care or not, you are affected. Let me turn the clock back for you. Local and international banks are accused of colluding to manipulate the Rand dollar exchange between 2007 and 2014. And the impact of that is still pinching us today. And the Competition Commission says there's already proof that several banks did conspire to rig the currency. And locally, it's First Rand Bank, ABSA, Standard Bank, and Nedbank that are accused. However, what does all of this mean in simple terms, and what an honorable constituent like you and I can possibly hope for? I mean, we're screwed anyway. I spoke to an economist, Adrian Saville.
Zakes the brain picker.
Oh, hi Adrian. How are you?
All right, and you?
I'm fine, thanks. By the way, my name is Zakes Twala.
How's it taste?
I'm fine, thanks. If you don't mind me asking, where are you? In the country?
Yeah, I'm in Johannesburg.
If you were to explain the RAND manipulation as if you are talking to a 5-year-old, what would you say?
The idea behind the rand manipulation is that you've got the trading desks of big banks who are buying and selling things, because we're talking to a 5-year-old, these things could be anything.
Yeah.
Very often when you've got a conversation about currency, people are immediately sort of caught by the numbers and the fact that you're quoting one currency and another currency and you feel a little bit like deer in the headlights. Quickly, the conversation becomes confusing. But, rather than thinking about the rand being 1776 to the dollar or, trying to convert dollars back to rands, imagine that you're paying 17 rand 76 for oranges or 1776 for a bread or a newspaper. Think of the currency as a thing. And the idea that's going on behind the claim of or the charge of currency manipulation is that you've got trading desks who are working in substantial sums of money and using those sums of money to move the rand around to the advantage of the bank and to the disadvantage of their customers. So that's the assertion. It's a very grand claim. Unfortunately, when we get out of the language of 5-year-old, it starts describing this to a 5-year-old. It starts to become technical quite quickly. But the easiest way to think of it, if we were describing this to a 5-year-old, is to say you've got a bank which has got a lot of money and it is trying to buy oranges or sell oranges for clients in very, very big amounts. And because the amounts are so big, they have the ability to change the price of the oranges or the bread or the newspapers, whatever it is. So, the manipulation is a suggestion that the banks are actually able to move the price around to suit their pockets, to favor their pockets, and to gain at the expense of their clients. And even more importantly, if you look at the at the spirit behind the assertion, is the suggestion that this doesn't just hurt clients, it actually hurts the country. And so there is a national imperative behind this.
Has it ever been done before, the RAND manipulation? Because I've watched a
Yeah,
documentary called The Inside Job. Have you watched it before?
I've seen the inside job. I
Yeah.
know it well, yes.
Yeah. If you were to differentiate the two, compare the RAND manipulation and the inside job.
So Zex, it's first let's just be clear on a couple of things. The one is, is it possible to manipulate prices? Absolutely. Um, this is within the realms of possibility, and you see it, especially where you've got people participating in markets that they can coordinate their trades,
Mm.
but they have to coordinate their trades out of the line of sight of the rest of the market because what they are doing is illegal. So, I think that that's the first requirement is you have to have at least two parties who are willing to conspire, collude in what is an illegal arrangement. And then, they need to be able to do this in a way that it is, I suppose, sufficiently big to justify them doing something illegal. And also, they need to be able to do it in a way that they can't be tripped up or, have their plans pulled out from under their feet, and they actually land up being on the wrong side of the transaction. So it actually requires, a fair amount of coordination and, to put it bluntly, a criminal mind to do this. That doesn't quite answer your question. Let me answer your question more directly, in terms of has this been done before? Absolutely. We've seen prices being rigged through markets around the world over time. Possibly, one of the better known examples, you make reference to Inside Job. And around that time, one of the grand examples was Bernie Madoff, who was pretending to put trades through and then reporting on those pretended trades. So that's one example of rigging where he was pretending to make trades and then reporting those pretended trades to his clients. That's a variation on what we're discussing here. But more explicitly, insider trading is an example of on a stock market, which is probably the more widely known example of the price manipulation, where I know something about an asset. That information is valuable, and based on that information, I can get a price that is going to work in my favor because something good is going to happen to the investment, and so I can buy it, or something bad is going to happen to the investment, and so I can sell it. Now, those are also variations on rigging or manipulation, illegal participation. This is called insider trading. But what we are referring to here are people who are not necessarily, sharing information that is about the nature of the asset, but rather just agreeing on the way in which they will trade that asset and setting that price to their advantage. I mean, to go, right to the heart of your question, has this been done successfully before? In the instance of thinly traded assets where the market is relatively small and you could do this illegally, yes, we've got those examples. But in the case of currency, this is a very, very big claim for a couple of reasons. The first is the number of participants in the market. We're not talking about 3 or 4. We're not talking about a handful of participants. We're talking about 30, 40 banks that were originally named. To suggest that there are 30 or 40 parties in that original claim colluding and rigging prices, that's a grand assertion. If it was being done, then wow, that is extraordinary coordination. More than that, though, the size of the currency market this is a massive market. In the case of the Rand, you're talking about the latest numbers I saw were sort of in the order of $70 billion a day. And to say that you are actually rigging a market of this size across that many participants, and it wasn't that this was a one-off transaction. It is, the suggestion is that this has been done over many, many years. So, the more we put those components into the cocktail, the more unlikely it sounds. And then let's not focus on us. Let's just talk about, the efforts to do this in other places. The Bank of England tried to manage the British sterling, British pound. Bank of England is the British pound is a much bigger market than the rand, but the Bank of England, the Central Bank of England, is also a much bigger bank than South Africa's central bank. That they are not a commercial bank. So this is a central bank that's got access to, you know, all of the ammunition they need, including their country's foreign exchange reserves. They weren't able to successfully manipulate the British pound. Bank of Japan, for a long time, tried a similar endeavor to try and move the yen in the direction that they wanted. Weren't able to do it. And it's worth remembering, in this challenge that the South African Reserve Bank, late 1990s, under the governorship of Chris Stoltz, tried to defend the rand against, what was deemed to be a raid on the rand during the emerging market crisis. The Asian and Russian crises of the late 1990s saw spectacular sell-offs in the rand. And the South African Reserve Bank, with all of their arsenal, including the country's foreign exchange reserves, tried to move the rand against the dollar. And eventually, they exhausted the country's entire foreign exchange reserves. So, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Nothing is impossible. But if you put all of those things together, Zakes, if you put the coordination that is required, the size and the depth of the market, the number of parties that are involved, and the fact, perhaps, I haven't made mention of this point, but it's also worth bearing in mind, the fact that most of this trade is happening outside of South Africa, not inside of South Africa. It's happening in foreign markets. Put all of these things together, it's just incredibly hard to arrive at the conclusion. And I'll never say, impossible, because nothing is impossible. There might be a unicorn somewhere, but this takes on the dimensions of unicorn status. Mute, Zakes.
Sorry, technology.
You back?
Yes, I'm back. So I was saying that this happened back in 2008 and 2013, before the
Yep.
case was launched. So between 2013 and 2017, what was happening during that period?
You mean in terms of the fact that nothing was heard?
Yes, we heard nothing of this until the case was launched.
Yeah, and that too is, perhaps a little curious. I suppose, one part of the explanation might sit inside of what was going on politically at the time in the country. And during this period, this is where we saw the likes of Bell Pottinger make reference to white monopoly capital. There were, very big assertions being made about what the banks were doing, the large banks in particular, and other large companies, the things that they were getting up to line their pockets at the expense of the country. So, there's a political narrative at that time that sits around this. But there's a jaundiced view or a cynical view might say exactly your suggestion. Wow, this is a long time to be quiet. Then further, or in addition to that, from then to now, you're also quite hard pressed to find any hard evidence that's been presented. There's reference to conversations, there's reference to quotes being posted by different traders, inside of financial services chat rooms. Those are ordinary practices. Those are quite common practices. That's the way, the rooms operate. There's nothing unconventional about that. So, the thing that's curious in all of this is this absence of big evidence that says, here's the hard evidence to demonstrate, here's the smoking gun. um, that's still missing
Yeah.
in all of these challenges. And then, even if there was a smoking gun, and I hear, my explanation here is I don't want to come across as sort of, in any way sort of being inferred that I'm somehow, got an agenda to push here. I have no agenda. If the banks were responsible for price rigging, that they should be charged,
Yeah.
and they should be held fully accountable, because there are costs to that, and the costs are to your clients, to the country, to business confidence, etc. So, the fact that there isn't evidence, the fact that this is hard to assert, doesn't suggest that it's not all possible. But if it has been done, then let's see the evidence. And as you're pointing out, these claims now go back over 10 years and longer.
Yeah.
This is a remarkable time to have sort of made an assertion, and we're still waiting to see the hard evidence.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder aloud if, the damage that's being done is, it takes on other forms, including, damage to business confidence, damage to institutional fabric.
Yeah. You're talking about the damage. Who's feeling the damage? Is it us or it's other parties like your shareholders? Who's feeling the pinch of this damage?
Well, if you go and look at the evidence led by Advocate Hofmeyr
Mm.
in the Constitutional Court a few days back, what she alluded to was that on the day that the announcement was made, Standard Bank's share price moved down, or market capitalization moved down by about 8.5 billion rand. Now, that's a direct impact on the shareholder. That,
Yeah.
you could say on that day, shareholders lost 8.5 billion. Keeping in mind that, share prices move up and down for a range of reasons. We can't say it was only that on that day that caused the 8.5 billion to be wiped out, but that's the number that we've got on the table, and we can point at least that far and say it coincides with the announcement on that day. So shareholders are the obvious people to go to. Where else could losses be carried? Well, if the rand was rigged, and it was rigged so that the rand progressively weakened, then you could say South African consumers have paid the price, because a weak rand in a country like South Africa, which imports about 1/3 of the economy, a steadily weakening rand would mean that 1/3 of everything we buy is being bought at higher and higher and higher prices. So that would be direct damage imposed on South African households. But then there's a whole bunch more that you have to throw into the mix, because South Africa is not just an importing country, it's also an exporting country. 1/3 of our economy is exported. So if it is the rand that's weakened, then everything that we're earning over that period, we would be receiving more and more rands. So exporting businesses would actually be advantaged by this. It quickly becomes very, very difficult to, figure out if this was done, who would have gained from it, and to what extent, and over what periods. There's a tremendous amount of noise in trying to disentangle all of that. But I mean, we could make sweeping claims, and a sweeping suggestion would be something like this:
Mm.
if the rand was weakened, then we could measure it in the form of higher consumer price inflation. South African households have paid the price.
Ah, so I see. Now, looking at how this has been going on, can we reverse back to the original amount after manipulation? Can the rand be reverted back?
Well, you're saying after the manipulation.
Yeah.
I'm first going to say, in the absence of hard evidence,
Yeah.
And given all of the necessary inputs
Mm.
to suggest that there's been manipulation, um, I'd have to go and look to other causes for the smoking gun. Go and find other smoking guns.
Ah.
And, what other smoking guns could we have happening here? Well, how about state capture? Um, that might be a cause for rand weakness. What about anxiety around South Africa's political status? That rewind 10 years, you had an African National Congress that had a convincing majority, advanced to now, and you've got a coalition government. Economies under coalition governments don't do so well. So maybe that's a steady decay of political power might be part of the explanation. Or, how about that South Africa over the period has suffered from power outages and logistics, compromised logistics that we can't get stuff from pit to port. That might mean we haven't been able to earn scarce foreign exchange. And if you can't earn scarce foreign exchange, then your currency is likely to get weaker. Or throw all of that in and just say South Africa has had an average of 1% economic growth over the last 15 years. That could explain currency weakness. So there's so many things going on,
Yeah.
that we could say explain currency weakness. And then, as a final breath, over this period, it's not so much that the rand has weakened, in and of itself. The dollar has also strengthened against many currencies. So could some part of this be dollar strength rather than rand weakness?
But the,
Well, it's
the dollar is always getting stronger. If it gets weaker, it's not a dramatic weakness. Why is that? Why can't we be
yeah,
on the same level as the dollar, where if we are weak, we are not terribly weak?
yeah. Look, um, so what you've seen over the course of 2025 is you have seen, fairly broad based dollar weakness.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is if we go to the early part of the year, you've got, the rand sitting closer to 20 to the dollar. And, as we speak today, the rand is 17.50 to the dollar. The temptation is to say, the rand has strengthened, call it by 10% against the dollar. But if you look at the dollar rate against the euro, the yen, British pound, they also have, strengthened against the dollar, or the dollar has weakened against them. So the fact that the rand has moved with all of the other currencies suggests that this is more about dollar weakness than rand strength. Now, I mean, your question is why could the rand not get significantly stronger? I think for the rand to get significantly stronger, say to 15 to the dollar, or where all of this started, 10 to the dollar,
Yeah, oh, that'd be
um,
nice.
wouldn't it be nice? You would have to have a whole lot of things align. And those things in part would require perhaps some dollar weakness, but more than anything, it would require, real compelling evidence of the rand having become, or the rand being underpinned by a strong economy,
Mm.
better economic growth, recovery in infrastructural investment. Look, inflation has been low and stable, so there is some positive news in all of this.
Yeah.
That certainly augurs well for the rand. But for the rand to recover, your words, where the manipulation started, for us to get all the way back there, you would need the damage of state capture to be undone. You'd need investor confidence to return to South Africa. We'd want to see, economic growth sitting up at well above population growth, fiscal restraint and consolidation so that our government budget starts to look a lot healthier, so on and so forth.
Now, bringing it back to South Africa, where everything is taking place in court now, and if I'm not mistaken, the Commission's advocate, Tembeka Toby, if I'm not mistaken, she's saying that
Yes.
the banks could possibly walk free because it's quintessential transnational cartel. What is that?
Mm, mm. So the banks that would most obviously, and let's use your inverted commas here, walk free, are those that would fall outside of the jurisdiction, of the commission. And let me just, put my, put my hands up, in a display of this is beyond my pay grade, but my understanding is the competition doesn't have the jurisdiction to bring foreign banks, into this who are dealing outside of the country. That's my understanding. You'd need someone with. Say again.
Nedbank.
Yes, because they are working inside of South Africa, and so then you would have the jurisdiction on the bank dealing inside of South Africa. So, if you're outside of the jurisdiction, then you can't go over after a bank that is, acting outside of your jurisdiction, whether they are acting, illegally, according to South African law, is, it's actually academic. And, and I'm not saying that forgives it or excuses it, but you would have to go after the bank in that market under that country's rules.
So it's possible that Nedbank will not walk free like other banks that are outside of the jurisdiction.
I mean, now you're taking us deep into the realm of speculation.
Okay.
And also, I'll put that, onto the table and say, I think that's also beyond my pay grade. I would hate to sort of start venturing into, who might be guilty here and who isn't. I just don't think I'm equipped to comment fairly or in an informed way on that.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Adrian, for your time.
Cheers, Ace. Take great care. Bye-bye.
Subscribe.